The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it, Wednesdays here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Hope you're doing all right. A lot to talk about, a lot to listen to with Matt Rhule as he spent time with the media session today, and plenty to get into with NIL, quarterback discussion, more NIL, running backs on to year two. So we'll hear from Coach Rhule. We'll check in with Mike Babcock from Hail Varsity, get his thoughts. And then more in hour two, more Nebraska football thoughts. It's weird that the season's over, and it's been over for a little bit, but on to the offseason, on to year two, says Coach Rhule. Some recruiting updates. You won a big-time battle for Grant Brix. Kudos to Nebraska football for that. And you have Carlon Jones reopening his recruitment. We'll tackle it all. Evan Bland also going to join us in hour two from the Omaha World-Herald. You're welcome to jump in. 489-1240, 489-1240, the number to get in. 800-825-5865. Toll free wherever you hear us across the state on the Hail Varsity Radio Network. Always check us out on the stream. It's so much fun to see folks new and consistent folks checking in. Hail Varsity YouTube channel is where you watch that. Elijah, you got your sleeves rolled up. You ready to go? You had a night of bowling. You apparently had a night at the gym before bowling. Get all swole so you can make those pins crack.
Other way around, gym after bowling. Bowling's the nice warm-up. And then you sneak in the gym. That was your, 2.5 hour warm-up session was the bowling? It was only about an hour 45.
Okay.
And it was a good night. I averaged a 187 on the night.
Beautiful.
Took a lot of points, so that was good. It was leg day at the gym, so less good. But
you were there for your team.
Oh, yeah. I stepped up when it mattered. We're in second place in the league right now. I'm not sure if that performance was enough to get us over the hump and get us back into first place, but it's a step in the right direction.
And then the dreaded leg day. Well, listen, let's start with Grant Brix before we get into Coach Rhule, and we'll dive into the going rate for quarterbacks, and Matt Rhule laid that out between $1 and $2 million for what the portal costs, the cost of business are, and that is reality, but it just seems astronomical. It's more than some backup quarterbacks are getting in the NFL, quite frankly. But on to Grant Brix. Nebraska just never took no. And when you look at a guy like Grant Brix at 6'6", 280, the vicinity was right just across the river in Iowa, not far. So vicinity was big for Nebraska on this. And I know Bama had an offer out there for him, but you've got two programs that are just better right now on the field than Nebraska in Oklahoma and Kansas State. Kansas State not far removed from a Big 12 championship. Oklahoma not far removed from a playoff appearance, right? So the Sooners have been part of the Final Four. The Sooners have had lots of success on the field despite the whole Lincoln Riley situation. And Coach Raiola, Nebraska, just never said no and kept on the tails here of Grant Brix and won this recruiting battle. And it was just so cool a few weeks ago to see that Husker 18-wheeler there out front of Brix's high school. And then to see it kind of come full circle on social media with Brix's announcement and the video where he gets in to the equipment 18-wheeler, gives that horn a big old pull, couple of tugs down in the Haymarket. So A+ on the video production there. But that's a big win for Nebraska. And you look at this 2024 offensive line class, you've got Brix, you've got Peters, you've got Pyle, Tamua, Davidson. You've got your 5 offensive linemen. And if you want to go get more, well, you can look at portal or you can look at JUCO. You still got Big Teddy P that was able to finish out this year after coming back from injury. And Elijah, you got to be excited about the commitment to develop on the offensive line, and that's where you're going to win football games. Rhule was asked about the offensive and defensive line, how they competed. We'll hear that in a minute. But that's where you're going to make your money, not only in the Big Ten, even the new Big Ten, but as Nebraska wants to climb the ladder, that's how they've done it for years. That's why you have all those trophies and championships, is because you were better in that war of attrition, and you just had dudes. You had NFL dudes, and Nebraska made them, and made them at a great level for a lot of years. And you had the depth of numbers. So when you had your pipeline graduate, the guys that were waiting their turn in '95 came in and didn't really miss a beat. It was pretty impressive. I know I hearken back to history, but that's how you're gonna keep building this thing back to where it needs to be on the field.
Yeah, and clearly the storylines this offseason are going to be less about Grant Brix and Preston Tamu and about the incoming offensive linemen, but whenever you look at any level of football, the best way to hide inconsistent quarterback play is a strong running game, a strong offensive line. Oh, guess what? Your quarterback's got 10 seconds to throw the ball. It makes him look a lot better.
It's 3rd and 2. You hand it off, right? You hand it off. You don't go empty.
Or you get to 3rd and 2 instead of 3rd and 6 because you hand it off on 1st down for 4 yards. You hand it on 2nd down for 4 yards. Now the defense has to think, are they going to hand it off for 4 yards again, or are they going to run a little play action, just send the tight end out into the flat and pick up an easier 2 yards that way? What's it going to do? I mean, the best way to hide that inconsistent quarterback play or that subpar quarterback play is the offensive line. Is that a recipe for a college football playoff berth? Is that a recipe for a Big Ten championship?
Georgia's pretty good at it. Michigan's pretty good at it when push comes to shove. I know they have more than capable. They have very good quarterbacks.
They don't have subpar. They have par quarterbacks. Their quarterbacks aren't hitting for birdie. They aren't hitting for eagle, but they're hitting for par. Nebraska had quarterbacks that could hit the fairway this season. But, I mean, Iowa made it to a Big Ten championship game this year with a quarterback that hasn't hit a fairway all season since he came in.
Not the right fairway.
But you do enough. You have a great defensive line, a great front seven, a good enough offensive line. It can hide some of the deficiencies of that quarterback spot. I'm not saying that Nebraska should continue trying to run an offense with a subpar quarterback like Iowa has tried to do in recent years. But it is sometimes the easier fix, as Matt Rhule got into, we'll get into this here in a second, than maybe paying $1.5 or $2 million for a one-year rental at the quarterback spot. Maybe just invest in the offense line is a better way to go. Husker fans won't want to hear it because that insinuates a longer build. It takes time to develop those guys along the lines of scrimmage, but you look 3-4 years down the road, these guys could be the guys that are potentially leading you to a 10-2 type season, even if they don't have a quarterback.
Well, and to be honest, by midway through a second year, you're going to try and get a guy some reps in game to see if he can hang, and you'll be able to tell how he's practicing, how he's progressing. So the good news is Grant Brix, you're able to round out your offensive line class, super athletic, and he comes from a run-heavy offense where he's really talented at firing off the football and just mashing folks. It's going to be a transition for many to go into the Big Ten at this level of football and be adequate as a pass protector. So that's.
But on the flip side of things, one of the things that I've thought about, how many times have we heard from Charlie McBride when talking about guys making position switches on the defense? It's easier to teach a guy and start from the foundation than have to tear down just to get to the foundation, to break down those bad habits before you instill some good habits. That could be a net positive that, you know what, Donovan Rhule, you don't have to break down any poor pass protection habits, because he doesn't have any pass protection habits. I don't see a single pass protection highlight on his entire senior season, highlights on his entire junior season.
Film said, you see that end, you go kill it.
Yeah, I'm not sure that team threw the ball once last season.
Didn't have to.
They didn't have to. But like from an offensive line coach's point of view, from Donovan Rhule's point of view, it can be seen as a positive that he never had to throw the ball in high school, because guess what? You don't have any bad habits you have to break down. You can start from the foundation.
Let's get into Carlon Jones. And Carlon Jones, a four-star defensive lineman, an interior guy that is extremely quick, 6'3", 270, size, strength, agility, and one of those guys that you move from the probably interior defensive tackle, that three shade, to the outside. And he's a guy that out of Bay City, Texas, Nebraska identified early. the rest of the world said, oh, wow, this is some senior film we like. How about you come to Columbus, son? And Carlon Jones posting last night that his commitment is now open. And the backstory to this is, listen, he has a couple of other places he'd like to visit. Sounds like he's thinking maybe about a late signing session in February. And the tweet out there by Pot Roast, Nebraska's defensive line coach, I think explains it all. And it wasn't directed at anybody and just reading into here. But yesterday's price is not today's price. So when it comes to NIL, you wonder if Jones maybe had more of an NIL offer from Ohio State or was coming back to Nebraska for whatever the NIL arrangements may have been. But Nebraska, if you're Nebraska, you move forward, right? If he wants to keep looking and go visit a couple of more spots, if he likes Ohio State, Nebraska's not going to want to force anybody to be here, and then you don't want to have to constantly re-recruit to keep somebody here. You just move on. Really talented guy, a guy you want in the class, but you're going to have to try and make do, assuming he doesn't end up coming back to Nebraska. But I think that ship may have sailed if it's Ohio State and maybe some other options.
And a tweet I saw last night, I can't remember who it was, but it seemed to fit my thoughts well. If for whatever reason the trade you had to make to get Grant Brix was you let Carlon Jones walk, I think that's a trade that the Husker coaching staff and a lot of Husker fans are willing to make. If you remember back to Carlon Jones' recruitment, he was a low 3-star when Nebraska found him. They were down in Texas, and it's Matt Rhule's connections in the state of Texas, recruiting Bryce Turner from Bay City, Texas. And they find Carlon Jones while they're down there. They're on him early. He's one of those late bloomers that Matt Rhule talks about. And this brings me back to a quote from a couple of weeks ago, maybe a couple of months ago from Matt Rhule. Following Carter Nelson's visit to Notre Dame, he's kind of asked in a roundabout way, and he said, there's tier 1 guys and there's tier 2 guys. There's the tier 1 guys that you're going to continue to recruit whenever they look around because they're that important. And then there's the tier 2 guys that if they're going to look around, you know what, we'll go find space for somebody else because we want somebody who wants to be here. And if you want to shop around, it's not worth our time. Carlon Jones has official visits set up in the month of December. The Twitter sleuths have gone through his Twitter likes, and it seems like there was an element of he was unsure about playing time at Nebraska with the freshmen, Cameron Linhart, Prince Will getting playtime this year, Ty
Van
Robinson
Poppel
coming back, Van Poppel there, was concerned about the playtime, was concerned about the NIL factor. Sounds like maybe he could make some more money elsewhere. And then he goes and starts shopping around, and Nebraska, I think, considered him a tier 2 guy. They found him early on. They took a chance on him early. But you know what? If you're not all in on Nebraska, feel free. Go
Sure.
shop somewhere else. If you want to go to Ohio State, that's fair enough. Because it was a guy that Nebraska unearthed, and I think there's a little bit of a backhanded slap in the face that Nebraska feels. Maybe not outwardly, but I think inwardly, there's got to be a little slap in the face. Hey, we found you. We're the one who put you on the map here. We gave you the offer. You were a low 3-star whenever we found you, and now that you've made your rise through the senior year, which we expected you to do, you're going to go shop elsewhere. You know what? You go shop elsewhere. We'll find somebody else that wants to be here. That's the feel I get from this Carlon Jones. It stings a little bit, but I think Nebraska trusts what they currently have in that defensive line room, A, and B, I think they trust their eye for talent that, hey, we found a late bloomer in you, Carlon Jones. We'll go find another late bloomer that nobody else is talking about, and we'll get him before the signing day.
No, Nebraska has done a nice job of evaluation and then getting those young guys ready. And I didn't think you and I'd be having a near December conversation about a guy worried about playing time possibly at Nebraska versus Ohio State on the defensive line. And I don't know that it'll be any better at Ohio State or wherever he ends up.
Well, if you're worried about the playing time at Nebraska, I can understand why a kid says, well, I got the same concern at Ohio State, but they're offering me more money. And look at the guys that they've put in the NFL recently. They're playing for a Big Ten title in late November, our chance to go every single year.
Playoff contention. No, I get it.
I don't fault a kid for saying Ohio State's in on me. I'm going to go check it out. And I don't fault Nebraska for saying, hey, we were in on you first. And if you don't want to be here, if you're not interested in us, you want to go shop around, feel free. Go do that, but just not while you're committed to us.
Prettier girl right now. Tad checks in. Hope you guys have been getting my texts. We don't have a text line, Tad, unfortunately, but here's a great way to stay in touch with us on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Great year with the talent coach was given, but now it's time to build and don't start with the passing game. Start with learning how to run the ball like Michigan. We hear from Tad from time to time on the phone line. Anonymous checks in. We'll get to more of your stream comments as well as the show progresses. We'll hear from Matt Rhule around 4:40 or so. So Anonymous says, so apparently it takes $1.5 to $2 million to get a good quarterback out of the portal. So I assume someone will get Jeff Sims for a bag of Skittles and a 6-pack of Natty. Anonymous, wow. I don't have the exact figure that Sims got. I know there was endorsement deals, but that is a sticking point. And it's the world you live in right now, Elijah, where there are a lot of programs, a handful of them, that are going to spend to get. You got to be able to get that guy to campus, hope that he is as talented. Let's use Quinn Ewers as the first $1 million guy, right, for NIL. Goes to Ohio State because he couldn't take the money in Texas, transfers back to Texas knocking on the playoff door, and that's just what it is. And there's a lot of coaches privately that are probably just sick about this. And what do you do? I mean, do you roll the dice and spend a lot in the portal, or do you try and see what you got and get what you got better?
Well, noted Nebraska hater Bud Elliott from 24/7 and CBS, we spent some time talking about it this week. He said maybe that's what it costs to get a quarterback to say yes to play in Nebraska's offense.
Wow. Mike Babcock's on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. It's Hail Varsity Radio on a Wednesday. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Mike Babcock is with us, and we say hi to F-Bomb Brian, I believe out in, is it Kearney, Brian?
Hastings, bud.
Hastings. Pride of Hastings right here. Brian, what do you say?
There's been something I've been pondering since last Thursday. Jeff Sims had, 47 passes, and on those 47 passes, he had 6 interceptions, something like that.
The picks were up there. The fumbles were up there, yeah.
So you're telling me they didn't see this in the preseason? What were they seeing?
They had film at Georgia Tech, different offense, right? So you had turnover numbers that are right there in ink. You had turnover numbers in the spring, presumably, and then you saw how turnover-prone the offense was overall in the spring. And there's word out of camp that you just had turnover issues from the offense in general as you kind of ramped up in fall camp. Now, we weren't hiding or posing as a bush. I mean, we weren't there to physically see it. But, yeah, I mean, you've had it. So you bring a guy in that you're kind of tantalized by the tools, and you just hope you can fix it or curb it.
But, yeah, if the guy has, I don't remember exactly how many touchdowns, but it was in the 30s, low 30s, like 32 touchdowns to 26 interceptions. That is a big red flag, my friend. I'm sorry, but I'm not giving you a look.
Well, and you know what? Maybe there were other options they wanted, they didn't get.
Yeah.
And here is the option that is attainable. So let's try and see what we got there. You end up settling sometimes.
Kind of like on the last day of deer season, and I haven't got a buck, so I'll just take the spike.
Sure. There you have it. Brian, thanks for the phone call. There he is. F-Bomb Brian. That we always start sweating there. We love hearing Brian from Hastings. Mike Babcock with us. Babbers is just all over Nebraska football. Can find him on Twitter at MDBabs and subscribe to his twice weekly newsletter with Hail Varsity. Mike B at hurrdatsports.com. Babbers, do you believe football season's over? How are you?
Football season is never over. I'm fine.
You're right. I'm wrong.
It's always there. We got recruiting. We got spring ball. We got winter conditioning. It's always there.
Yeah, it is. And let's get your thought here. And Elijah and I are touching on this and want to kind of get your take. Portal versus the old-fashioned recruiting. And, what did you take away from Matt Rhule when it comes to filling some holes on the roster? Portal, the kind of the recruiting way where you go high school or JUCO. What do you think the lean is for Rhule?
I think the lean is high school and JUCO recruiting.
Mm-hmm.
the portal thing is confusing to me, because I don't think, like, coaches can't just contact a recruit or a guy in the transfer portal and say, hey, we're going to pay you $2 million if you come here or whatever. There's a fine line, I guess, between what you can do and what you can't do. Or I don't really understand the dynamic of that, of the portal part of it. And
you either tamper or you don't, allegedly, right? I mean,
yeah, I think that's right. And if you're going to do it the right way, you don't. So, where are you? You're better off, I think, going to recruit guys that you feel like you want and that you can develop. And he talked a lot about development, and I think that's the way to go. The other thing, and I wrote about this, the fact that Nebraska runs some option, I think that's important, because it's something that not a lot of programs do still. And sometimes you're not going to get quarterbacks necessarily that want to run option if they want to be a passer and go to the NFL, and passing is primarily the thing. Although you see a guy like Lamar Jackson, his ability to run is an important factor, and that's a little bit different than it used to be. So that all comes into play, I think, when you're specifically trying to recruit a quarterback, whether you're looking at portal or recruiting.
Mike, what'd you make of Matt Rhule's comments today about the price of a transfer portal quarterback, $1.5 to $2 million? Because here's the thing. It's usually not hard to find a quarterback in the portal. Finding the right one's a little more difficult, but if you go back to 2020, among the top 50 quarterbacks in the 2020 quarterback class, only 7 graduated from the school that they committed to as a quarterback. 43 either changed positions or entered the transfer portal and changed schools at some point in time. So there's no shortage of quarterback options out there. Hear that 1.5 to 2 million number. You've had some national commentators saying that seems a little high. Maybe that's just what it is for Nebraska. I want to get your read on that. Is that Matt Rhule trying to drum up some NIL within the state and say, hey, you guys want a better quarterback than what you saw this year? Open up your pocketbooks. Or is that Matt Rhule setting up the fan base for disappointment, I guess, and saying, you know what, we liked what we saw from Chubba. Maybe we won't go into the portal this year. It's because the price is high, but maybe we're just gonna set you up for disappointment that way. What do you make of that comment?
I just think he was being straightforward about where things stand with it. I was surprised, a little bit surprised, I guess, that it was that kind of money that you're talking about when you're going into the portal for a quarterback. But I think he was just trying to be honest about it. And one of the things that you have to consider is, again, it's Nebraska. The recruiting base in Nebraska is a little bit different than it is from other areas where there's a wider population base, and it becomes a little bit easier to be in that position where you can entice guys like that. So I think he was just trying to be honest about it. And I think that, as he said, if Purdy had been healthy the whole year, he might have had an opportunity sooner, and he might have shown what he can do. I mean, you have to be, I think, loyal to the guys that are in your program that want to be there, and I think that's what he was doing.
It also goes down to that development philosophy, right, where Rhule was pretty adamant throughout the half hour plus today about taking care of guys that have invested in Nebraska, and not only NIL, but you're not going to move off of somebody too quickly. I mean, I think they're going to see it through when it comes to the development, and he really takes a point of pride in that. That's my read, where he loves watching guys get better, but also giving them the tools to develop and get better, and that's all part of this build he talks about, where you're going to go get guys and you're going to go get better, and it's not going to be quick, but it's going to be probably appropriate time-wise. And then once it all happens, man, you get it going, and it's downhill in a good way, right? A downhill run, right? Downhill in that way where you go get guys, you build, and then you you get their replacement / backup built up, and you have depth, you have talent, and you have options. And you saw it already in year one with how deep the defensive line was.
Yeah, you do it the right way, but and that's where the transfer portal and the NIL comes into play here. Is if you're developing a guy and you've had him for a couple of years and he's starting to develop, but he is not in the starting lineup yet or whatever, and then somebody comes in and says, or he gets the idea that, hey, I can transfer somewhere else and play. That's where it impacts your ability to develop guys, to keep them in the program. It was different back in the day, when it was difficult to transfer. So you get a guy and you bring him in and he redshirts, and then he, plays on the scout squad or whatever, and he works his way up. But he can develop, and that he's going to be in the program. By the time he's a senior, he's developed and he's really making a contribution. But in the transfer portal NIL situation, he can get to the point where he's maybe going to get an opportunity to show what he can do. And it's like, well, I'm not starting. I'm going to look for something else. I'm going to go somewhere else. That makes it more difficult, I think, to develop guys.
It's Mike Babcock with us here on Hail Varsity Radio discussing Matt Rhule's presser from earlier today, his first official presser of the offseason. And Mike, I want to get your thoughts here on the recruiting win Nebraska got yesterday. We spent some time talking about this in the first segment. First, Grant Brix in, Carlon Jones out. You have any reaction to those two? You gain a piece on the offensive line and lose a piece on the defensive line.
Well, one of the things that Rhule said today was that numbers are going to become a factor too, that if you've got guys that are maybe inclined to look around a little bit, give them the opportunity to do that, because you have a limited number of scholarships available. And if you don't have a guy that's 100% committed to your program, maybe you're better off letting him look around, and you're bringing in somebody who is committed to the program, who wants to be there. So I think it's a positive, the guy that they got. I think it's neither good nor bad that the guy left. That's his decision. He obviously didn't feel like he was this is where he wanted to be necessarily. That's probably not the kind of guy that they want. And you can always benefit from an offensive lineman. I think that's the case here. So I think it's a positive. I don't think that it's a negative.
Mike, about 90 seconds. The final vote goes to Mike Babcock in his football office. Would you spend $1 million plus on a quarterback?
Well, if I had it, but again,
I love it.
It's not my decision, right? I mean, it's still.
But I'm saying overall, do you see Nebraska ever doing that?
Well, I don't know what the NIL situation is. The 1890 thing. What kind of money is available there, and whether you want to, like Rhule said again today, you want the money to go to a guy that's in your program, not a guy that's transferring in like that, because you want guys in the program to know that that you have belief in them. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that I would look at when I'm talking about what would I spend it. You want to get the money, the big money, to the guys that are in your program.
Well, and you're rolling the dice, presumably, if you spend that kind of jack on somebody, and does he come in, deliver, and is he as impactful? I mean, if I'm dropping $1 million to $2 million on somebody, he better be in that Tommy Frazier class where you're playing for championships. That's easier said than done. Babbers will check in next week. Thanks for giving us a few minutes today.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, there he is. Mike Babcock. Good stuff from Babbers at MD Babs on Twitter. We'll hear from Matt Rhule. Hail Varsity continues on. We're powered by Cornhead Lager.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. Evan Bland coming up at 5. Big thanks to Mike Babcock from Hail Varsity. Brandon has checked in, says Good afternoon. Thanks for checking in, Brandon. The stream where you can find us, Hail Varsity YouTube, can also go Spotify, iTunes, Google Play for the podcast. And Elijah brought up the stages of grieving, and Matthew checks in and lets us know where he's at. I'm more sure what stage of the grieving process I'm in, but I'm going to try and behave. So there's the anger part. Matthew still maybe hovering on. You have Brian checks in. Speaking of quarterbacks, we need a quarterback, and he ain't on the roster for 24. I don't care how much he costs, or at least find one that's within the Big Red budget. That's just it, isn't it? I mean, you're into dollars and cents with the spending. And it's a new world, man, and it's been newer with NIL, but case in point with Wazoo, Cam Ward, stud ball player, 10 offers, $1 million each. And that can be the difference for you. It can also break you up if you don't pick the right one. And it can also blow up a room if you've been working on developing somebody that may be ready to launch with his own career and be a really good quarterback for you. So the management part of this that's why you get paid a ton of money as a head football coach, coordinator, quarterback coach, right, to make the right decision. Mm-hmm. Who's on the horn?
Gary's on the line with us.
All right. Gary, thanks for hanging on. Go for it.
Hey, yeah, I just want to make a couple comments regarding the conversation that's going on. And I don't disagree with the development and the debate with the portal and so forth. But one very important aspect isn't being thrown into discussion, and that is we are critically in need of a quarterback. You know, if this team doesn't win next year, I just say, there's enough grumbling going on this year. And, and the big question, who's going to do this development? If it's the same person that did the development this year, is there a lot of confidence that we can actually do that? I mean, it sounds kind of negative, but it's realistic. Yeah, I would love to see us, find the guy in development, but who are we going to play in the meantime to get us to that next level? I mean, we owe the defense something. We owe them an offense so that they can enjoy wins and the whole team can enjoy wins. So that's my statement at this point. I'm not debating which was the best way. I'm saying, what do we need right now? Anyone that says that we don't need somebody that can come in and make something happen is watching a whole different team than I've been watching this year. Thank you much, guys.
Hey,
great show.
Gary, appreciate you, man. Thanks for the phone call. And that's a giant question. And it's the old give me the right answer. Give me the right answer at quarterback, and that is the question that we don't have an answer to. Based off one season, the level of faith isn't great with, okay, do you have somebody on here that can tutor a quarterback? I'll say this, you went through 3 quarterbacks, and despite the turnovers, Elijah, that were reasons for your losses, you still were with your backup quarterback, won 5 ball games. You had a chance to win 3 with your third-team quarterback. So the turnovers are very glaring. That's got to get better, yes.
And let's get into Elijah's reading of the tea leaves, because you mentioned the desperation, it almost feels like, for Nebraska to get a quarterback, especially among the fan base. I
don't sense that desperation with Rhule.
Well, let me lay out what I heard.
Or he's just
today.
Calm.
He's calm, but think about if you're Amigos this year, and you shelled out some money for NIL for Jeff Sims last year, or if you're any NIL person who had any money that was going to Jeff Sims, how do you feel about your investment here now, 6 months later? Probably not great. Well, probably a little less willing to shell out for another transfer.
If you get another phone call and say, hey, we got another quarterback coming in, oh, really? Is he like the last quarterback?
Exactly. I feel like Matt Rhule, his comments today, and this is, again, just me reading the tea leaves, no inside information, but reading the tea leaves. I think this is Matt Rhule saying, hey, guys, I know you probably don't feel great about your investment with Jeff Sims last year.
But I need more.
But guess what the reality of college football is? how desperate are you for a quarterback? Do you want to see Chubba Purdy lead this offense again next year?
I'm not against it. I'm not against it.
That's what I'm saying. Matt Rhule's getting up there and saying, that's where we're at right now. And we feel fine about that because transfer portal quarterbacks are a premium. We need some money for
and he's one of them.
And I think he is saying, without saying it, to the NIL powers that be out there, if you want me to go get a quarterback, if you want me to go improve this offense, if you want me to take care of this glaring hole, I need some money in my pocket. I'm going to overshoot. I'm going to say 1.5 to $2 million.
Give till it hurts.
I don't think Matt Rhule needs $1.5 or $2 million, but I think he's throwing that number out there because he wants the powers that be to fork up some money for him to be able to go hit the transfer portal this year, maybe even for more than just a quarterback spot. That's how I read this. Is Matt Rhule playing on the desperation of Husker Nation, saying, oh, well, maybe we don't need a quarterback. Portal quarterbacks are hard to get. They're very expensive. Maybe we'll just roll with what we have. I think
it's
wants
not a guarantee.
He wants the powers that be in Nebraska to panic and say, oh, maybe we don't get a quarterback next year. Here, blank check, Matt Rhule. Go do what you got to do. Get us a quarterback.
Who's on the line?
We have Bruce on the line.
Bruce, thanks for calling. Go for it.
Brother Chris, how you doing, bud?
We're good, man. Happy belated Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy belated Thanksgiving to you. Hope you and Bunny had a great one.
She didn't cook. It worked out.
Man, I hope she's not listening, dude.
Me too.
You get your tail whipped, man. You know?
What's the good word?
Hey, so on the quarterback thing, a couple different things. I haven't heard anybody talking about Danny Caitlin. Is he still coming? Yes or no?
Yeah, he's. I mean, the ink is not dry because it's not been signed, but he's in the class. He's not going to defect, I don't believe.
Okay, I just want to make sure that Caitlin's still here with us. And the other thing too is that the way I'm reading this whole quarterback controversy, if you want to call it that, which I really don't, but Chubba Purdy's not that bad of a quarterback, and he was injured this year. And, you got to look at the facts that Florida State wanted him. I think one of the Carolinas wanted him really bad. And so the kid has something that a lot of coaches have seen. And I think development with Chubba Purdy is the best way to go. And I think that maybe Matt Rhule is trying to ease Husker Nation into believing that because we saw him in 3 games, he's very composed. Let's put it that way. He wasn't a great quarterback, but he was composed. And given the fact that he was behind an offensive line that was piecemealed together throughout the entire season and didn't know how to play really to begin the season off, the kid didn't do too bad. Neither did Harvard, really. Okay,
I mean, they worked with what they had, and it needed to be better from a ball security standpoint, 1,000%. But no, I look at Purdy and I look at Harburg. If that's what you're running with next year, your job's to get them better so they're not costing you ball games with turnovers, or find another way to lean and roll offensively. Bruce, we're up against it. Thanks for listening, man. Appreciate the phone call, and good to hear from Bruce. 489-1240. We'll promise get you some Rhule audio here, but no, I think you're right, Elijah. I think. All right, here's the going rate. You want some proven stud, alleged proven stud? Pass the collection plate. Hour 1 winds down. It's Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time this hour, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Give Elijah a follow on Twitter. Entertaining and insightful at Herbal Essence at Schmidt_radio. That's where you can follow me. And this is Matt Rhule was asked, do you have to go to the portal to address the quarterback room?
I think that the portal for me is I either want to, if we go to the portal, I either want to get someone with at any position, someone with multiple years, I think is on caliber with the guys that we have, or someone who's instant impact upgrade, like someone who can make a difference. Make no mistake that a good quarterback in the portal costs $1 million to $1.5 million to $2 million right now. So just on the same page, right? So let's make sure we all understand what's happening. So there's some teams that have $6 or $7 million players playing for them. So we just kind of believe in like the old school way, the hard way, building. But that doesn't mean we won't look at people in the portal. We did it last year, right? It just means they have to be clearly an impact player for us if they're like a 1-year player, or they have to be someone that has multiple years to get in our program and develop. So, when I go back and look at our quarterbacks this year, obviously, everyone can look at the negatives, the turnovers and all those things. I also see a lot of positives. I saw a lot of positives in the way that Chubba played. I say to myself, if Chubba had played more throughout the course of the year, would he be further along, right? For whatever reasons he didn't, right? He got banged up and all those different things. Like, I think Chubba has a high ceiling. When I look at Heinrich, Heinrich wasn't even in quarterback meetings last year. Wasn't even allowed to go to the meetings. So I'm really proud of him. And I just think with further development, those guys have 2 years left. I think they're going to be good players. And so, but I'm not stupid. It doesn't mean that I'm not looking for everything. I'm just, trying to be very diligent about the process and making sure that, we always think long term, unless someone's like a huge impact player.
That is 1,000% it. You've got to think big picture long term, Elijah, but the urgency and in the moment and the quick fix is always hovering. And yeah, if you get it right at quarterback, you are Wisconsin with Russell Wilson. Like the first grad transfer that happened back in 2011 was Russell Wilson, who was a 500 quarterback at NC State. J.J. McCarthy is a high school recruit that's kind of been groomed and then was able, as a redshirt freshman, replaced a guy, by the way, because of competition at Michigan that had already taken Michigan to a playoff. I look at LSU, as awesome as their offense is with Jaden Daniels. LSU's always a quarterback away. Their defense is still giving up 40 a game, and they're a 3-loss team. Hartman, Notre Dame, killed it at Wake Forest. They're a nine-win football team at Wake. Notre Dame, because of their schedule, Notre Dame's a good football team. They're at, 8 wins this year.
Well, dare you go any further than Michael Penix at Washington?
And
is Washington a playoff team this year without Penix?
Washington, no. And listen,
are they a damn good team? Yes.
You got the two most important parts of Indiana. You got the offensive coordinator in Kalen DeBoer that's now your head coach, and he brought Penix with him because guess what? Kalen DeBoer finds quarterbacks and gets them. Now, that's the question here. And Rhule's approaching this right. You look, you analyze, and you pray to get it right. But take inventory on what you've got in your room, and you don't run them off. That's absolutely a lesson you learned from last year.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you, it's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. More on the portal discussion, the holes in the roster, where you go. Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World Herald to kick off Hour 2 at Evan Bland, OWH, on Twitter. And, Evan, it's been an eventful first hour. A lot of listeners in the stream and on the phones talking about the quarterback. We heard from Rhule before the end of Hour 1 with his presser today. And once your assessment here, we'll start off with just overall, what'd you take away from Coach Rhule's talk today, the 30 minutes plus he gave us? A lot of good items to hit in there.
Yeah, it was. It was, first of all, I think it's worth mentioning that it's kind of unusual to have an end-of-the-year press conference like that. Usually the season wraps up and coaches head off into recruiting and you just kind of go on to the next thing. And he, I think it was another reminder that Matt Rhule really puts a high value on communication and, sharing things with the fan base. And so he did that to a pretty high level for, like you said, about 35 minutes today, assessing the season, talking about roster churn, quarterbacking in the portal and other adventures in the transfer market, who might be coming back from the current roster, who's not. So, yeah, I thought it was all pretty informative to me. Kind of the big picture takeaway was when he said his mind's already on to year 2, right? The Black Friday was almost a week ago, and now it's about trying to assemble what that roster is going to look like for next year, getting down to 85 scholarships, kind of figuring out what that personnel is going to look like, and then eventually, once things settle down a little bit, sort of assessing more of the football piece of things, what Nebraska did well, what it didn't, how they're going to adjust. So just sort of on the precipice of a really busy month of December ahead with the transfer portal opening, signing day, early signing period next month. So lots going on, but definitely appreciated Matt Rhule taking a little time to break it all down today.
So let's talk quarterback here, and the numbers were put out there for Nebraska fans with the going rate for quarterbacks, right? Between $1 and $2 million. And there's got to be frustration in the world of college football where, say you've got a good kid that's been kind of working but behind the scenes, or had a really great year where you've put the time in on the trail, you got him ready, he goes out there, balls out, and cha-ching, here comes your uncle from the SEC, kidding, SEC, sorry, but there's a McDonald's bag full of money, and now it's all legal. And that guy you've spent time and sweat and effort in developing is no longer on your roster. That's the world you live in college football now because of NIL money and portal and transfer opportunity. But, you know, what's Nebraska's best step forward, in your opinion, Evan, with that quarterback group?
Well, first of all, what Matt Rhule said today when he was asked about NIL and the portal, he said the one thing he's against is teams buying players off of other rosters, and that's like to your point. There's been some of that going on. You look around college football certainly, and you see some examples of quarterbacks who are into the portal and committing elsewhere as grad transfers before it even opens in mass next week. So there's definitely a lot of behind the scenes work already going on, communication between a lot of schools. Nebraska's situation, it'll be interesting. Like, there's so much that we still don't know. I mean, Matt Rhule said, for example, that he's meeting with Jeff Sims tomorrow. He doesn't know his intentions yet, whether he will stick around at Nebraska or go elsewhere. He made mention of the fact that Heinrich Harburg a year ago wasn't allowed in quarterback meetings from the previous staff. Like, that's just kind of what their opinion was of him and his future at that position. So he's still pretty early in his process. And Chubba Purdy, Rhule, again, was pretty complimentary of the ceiling there. So you would figure that at least two of those players would stick around. And then you've got Daniel Kalin coming in from Bellevue West. He's been committed for a number of months now. And, whatever emerges from the portal, and it seems like there's a different name every day, and it's possible that name's not even in the market yet. I mean, because again, if you're not a grad transfer, your coach hasn't left your program, you're not even able to enter the portal just yet. So we don't have even a full scope of what those names could be. It's interesting. There are already a lot of really interesting names in there. Some long shots, some with previous connections to Nebraska or to Matt Rhule. Jerry Bohannon, for example, from South Florida, he was a Matt Rhule recruit and the headliner recruit in his 2018 class, and it looks like he's going to have 1 year left somewhere. So guys like that, you don't know if that would be an answer for sort of a 1 year transition sort of situation, or if Nebraska is going to double down on a multi-year starter, somebody that they can develop over the course of a couple of different seasons. So where the full picture is still coming into focus, and I think they're just at the early stages of it. So my take from what Matt Rhule said today was they're still very flexible on what that's going to be as the information comes to become evident.
Evan, the two thoughts I had with Matt Rhule's comments about the transfer quarterback today, I want to get your thoughts kind of briefly before I ask you a question. One is that either Matt Rhule is trying to drum up some additional NIL support from the powers that be in Nebraska, saying, $1.5 million, open up the checkbook, folks, or he's trying to undersell, over-deliver, and if he ends up not getting a portal quarterback that he likes, then he's kind of set the expectations low, and if he does get one, then great. I already said how difficult it was going to be. Now I'm over-delivering by bringing you a transfer portal quarterback. So my question to you is, if we get to late May and Chubba Purdy is the presumptive starter at Nebraska in the fall, you think Husker Nation revolts? What do you think the reaction to that will be?
Well, I think it's going to depend on how things go between now and then. If he has a great spring and balls out in the spring game and the offense looks different and it takes care of the ball and it, cleans up so many of the mistakes that we saw this season, then you could make a case for it. I mean, he was a highly rated recruit out of high school, former 4-star kid from Arizona. So, the pedigree is there. Obviously, everyone knows what his brother's doing in the NFL. So he's from a pretty good gene pool in that regard, too. Again, I think a lot of it's going to depend on who ends up in the portal. I mean, who are we talking about? The high-end guys, a lot of them already know where they're going. That's pretty evident. And, you can have a bunch of money, but you still have to have the quarterback pick you. And so, it's a matter of finding that match. And that person may not be there now. That person may not be there until the spring. I mean, that's when that second round of roster movement occurs, is after the spring, and depth charts are a little bit more visible, and you go from there. And so, we'll just have to kind of see how that goes. That's what it was for Casey Thompson last spring, if people remember. That was a move that didn't occur until the spring and then. So, there's just so much that's going to go into it between now and then. And you talk about Rhule in his press conference today. I always get the sense when he's talking to the media that he's really talking to his players. And so to me, that was not so much a, hey, let's raise the money, because I think Nebraska has the money. It was more a vote of confidence for his players, a vote of confidence for development that he's been able to hang his hat on as a head coach for the last decade. And maybe, something that could be attractive to somebody who is in the portal, who wants to be developed at Nebraska over the next couple of years. So that's kind of how I see it. Again, we're less than a week removed from the end of the regular season. There's a lot of time for things to sort of come to light, and we just got the first taste of that today.
Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World Herald, at Evan Bland, OWH, on Twitter, talking Nebraska, the portal, quarterback, and into the air quote off season, if there is such thing. And when you look at this Nebraska development mindset, this philosophy, I believe with what I've seen that the team can get better. The turnover has got to get stopped or drastically dialed back on, because that held you back. But do you think that there's what it takes on staff offensively, and Rhule was kind of asked this when it comes to duties, right? I mean, he's assessing all of that. The plan was to have a quarterback's coach. Didn't have that in year one, and you might have it in year two, you may not. But can whoever's in that quarterback room, portal or not, get to the get seasoned to the level they need to be at to go win ball games? I mean, what's your confidence level like moving forward with that? Does Nebraska have what they need coaching-wise on staff right now to get better at quarterback?
I mean, I think Matt Rhule believes that they do, and that's kind of the thing that matters. He was pretty clear about that a few weeks ago. This idea he was saying back then of firing someone, starting over with different terminology, and resetting every year. He called that ridiculous, especially as it pertained to Marcus Satterfield and some of the close losses that Nebraska's had. But it will be interesting, and Rhule did say today that, as much as he thought his staff did a good job this year, that will be part of the evaluations that he has when things slow down a little bit, once the portal closes and they're able to focus a little bit less on the roster and some of the other things. But you've got Tony White, who's interviewing for jobs, who it looks like, or he did not get that San Diego State job today. That was filled by Sean Lewis. So, maybe Nebraska dodged a bullet there, but his name's going to continue to be on the market this off season. And then, as Rhule said, the vision offensively originally was for Satterfield to coach tight ends and be the offensive coordinator and have somebody else be the quarterback's coach. And it didn't work out that way, and they hired it a different way. So what do you how do you potentially restructure that in the off season? You think about Josh Martin, who was promoted to full-time tight ends coach before the season. What happens with him? Does he stay in that role? Does he move back into more of an analyst position where he was? Like, these are all things that Matt Rhule is going to have to figure out and decide to try to maximize, especially on the offensive side, what this thing can be. And as it pertains to turnovers, like, as rough as it was, and man, was it rough. Like, I also think it's one area that can flip pretty quickly, and look no further than Northwestern. I mean, they cut down their offensive giveaways by 21. They went from 30 to 9, and it was a huge reason why they go from 1-11 to 7-5. So, like, it can happen. It's not this far-fetched idea that Nebraska can cut down on some of these things. And if some of that comes down to coaching, then maybe that's something we'll see reflected in these moves in the months ahead.
It's Evan Bland from the Omaha World Herald with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Evan, let's switch gears here, talk about Nebraska's recruiting victory of last night. Grant Brix from Logan Magnolia out in Iowa. He's going to be a Husker, assuming he puts his pen to paper here in a couple of weeks in the early signing day. And I'll get your reaction to that. Just how big of a recruiting win is that for Nebraska?
Yeah, it's huge on a number of fronts. I mean, anytime you beat Oklahoma, Kansas State, Alabama for the services of anybody, it's notable. And then you add to that the fact that it's at a position like offensive line where it looks like Brix could, at 6'6" and 290, has the body of a college tackle for a number of years. That it's huge. It's a testament to the message that Matt Rhule's put out there. It's the biggest recruiting win for Donovan Raiola as offensive line coach at Nebraska. I talked to Brix this morning about it. He said Corey Campbell, the strength coach, was a big part of it too, and his track record of getting guys physically ready to play at a high level. So that all goes into it. The fact that it's a number one recruit from the state of Iowa at a town in Logan, Iowa, that's just 90 miles from Lincoln. Like, that's all key stuff. And, you look to it as Nebraska tries to rise and be a contender in the Big Ten. Like, it's going to start with owning both lines of scrimmage on the offensive and defensive side. And I think we saw a lot of that defensively this year. And you look at what this offensive line could be in a couple of years as it transitions throughout, transitions over from some of its current starters that are going to be out by 2025. I mean, Brix is a guy, if he lives up to the potential that he has right now, could be a multi-year starter on the edge for Nebraska down the road. So competitive kid, really explosive run blocker. His high school team really doesn't pass at all, so it's hard to know what his skill level is as a pass protector right now. But massive win for them for sure.
Real quick, Evan, we'll get you out in about 60 seconds. Carlon Jones, are you surprised that he decommitted?
Not necessarily, and Matt Rhule kind of alluded to that today too. I mean, when you identify somebody first, the way Nebraska did, and then they blow up for their senior year, bigger schools are going to come calling. And that Ohio State offer and visit clearly made a difference for him, and I think that's just going to happen sometimes when you're a team like Nebraska that does identify its own talent. You're going to hit on some guys that you're probably not going to reap the benefits of making that identification. So, not ideal. That was a guy that Nebraska would really like to hang on to in its class. But as Rhule said today, too, I mean, they have a lot of work to do to get down to 85 scholarships. And not that you want to lose a guy of that caliber, but if there's a silver lining in it, it's, I guess one step closer to figuring out what this roster will look like next season.
Evan, we'll give you a shout next week. Always love talking ball with you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.
All right, there he is, Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World Herald. Take your calls and comments. We'll get to more of your thoughts in the StreamYard. Can always watch the show and rewatch the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, and more from Matt Rhule. Hail Varsity continues, powered by Cornhead Lager.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
489-1240, number to get in. Cornhead Lager powers this Hail Varsity Radio Wednesday. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. More from Matt Rhule here. A Jock Doc on the way. And Brian on the line, 489-1240. Brian, thanks for hanging in.
Hi, how are you?
Good. What do you think?
Well, I was just sitting here listening to you about the quarterback situation, and here's my feeling on it. We can't gamble. I think Purdy, I agree. Purdy's going to be a pretty good quarterback, but I don't believe that room's solid enough just to rely on him.
Sure.
Because Harburg's not a solid number 2 quarterback. Harburg's not even a quarterback as far as I'm concerned.
Here's the thing, and listen, he got you to 5 wins this year. I know there's limited passing, at least for what you've seen. You saw how tough he was. You saw him find ways to do it. Are you shutting off the ability to get better on Harburg? That's the question you have to ask yourself. And he's not played enough football per Rhule to do that. The same way they're not doing it to Purdy.
Yeah, and then as far as I'm concerned, maybe Rhule ought to give like $1 million of his salary back because he sure didn't earn it this year. Winning 5
Hold on, dude. You don't think he earned his money? I know they didn't get to a bowl game, but with their injuries
how many games did Northwestern win?
Well, did they beat Nebraska?
No, but they won 7 games, and they played pretty much the whole West Division like we did.
Well,
obviously.
No, they did. I think they are a little bit better at quarterback, too. And
I don't think they got beat up at the end of the year, too.
Yeah, from a turnover standpoint, they were.
Well, you can spin it any way you want.
No, I get you. I think that's a little outlandish to call for Rhule to give some of his money back. I think he did a good job in year 1. Did you want more wins? Yes. Should there have been better management moments? Yes. But I think they developed, and I think they'll be better in year 2, and I think they'll be better to the tune of that 7, 8, 9 win number. It's going to be a build. It's going to test your patience, but it's not going to be a nightmare.
9 wins.
I said 7, 8. I said 9 maybe. You got to get quarterback right, which is what we're talking about, right?
Still got the same OC. So, well, I don't know. Anyway.
Comes down to management. Hey, Brian, thanks for the phone call, bud. Appreciate it. There he is. Yeah, I mean, again, there's very little appetite for watching this reconstruction.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is you go back to last January, and Trev and Matt Rhule both said,
it ain't going to be quick.
We're going to do this the right way. We're going to build a developmental football program. We're going to build it up the right way for long-term sustained success. And then people aren't getting results fast enough, and now it's, Matt Rhule needs to give $1 million of his salary back. Was Brian going to go with the old, he needs to put that into the NIL fund, because that would be an NCAA violation for that to happen. I was wondering if that's where he was going to go.
This is from Uncle Art.
You stopped him first. But that being said, like last winter, it was, yes, like that's what Nebraska needs. They need development on the lines of scrimmage. They need development as a football team. That's how T.O. did it. And now you see the results of that it's going to take a little bit. You can't microwave these results of development. People get impatient. They say, Matt Rhule needs to give his money back. Which I understand. There's frustration. There's emotions that come with the football
season. How about you
season.
Get good enough on offense to not make the quarterback be your go win it for us, dude?
And that's what I said coming into the season. I think there's a reality in college football that you do, as good as your offensive line is, as good as your running backs may be, you still need a quarterback that can be a focal point of your offense. Like J.J. McCarthy, I think you could replace him with an average college football quarterback, and Michigan would still win a lot of games. They might still even run the table. I think J.J. McCarthy is slightly above average, but he's still a focal point of that offense and how he manages a game, how he finds his wide receivers, the confidence and kind of the leadership he has.
He takes care of the ball.
Exactly.
For the most part.
It's not 1992 anymore, and you can't have a quarterback that you just hide and your focal point is your running backs and your offensive line anymore. You can't do that anymore.
Son, don't fumble
in the
ball.
In the modern college football. But that being said, I don't think Matt Rhule wants an offense where his quarterback is his best player on offense. You still need a game changer there. Not maybe a game changer, a focal point.
You don't want to build around your quarterback, but, man, he can make things a lot easier offensively. You had Rhule asked about the lessons from the Sims experiment. Here's Coach's answer.
Well, I'm never going to say anything that's going to sound at all sound disrespectful towards a player. So, I think Jeff's an amazing young man, an amazing human that was there for his teammates every step of the way. Had we started off with a couple layup games and he got some confidence, maybe things would have gone better. He's really talented. Can run, dynamic, can make all the throws. Just turn the ball over too much. But I love who he is. I love the person that he is. So in terms of kind of what's the lesson from it? I just think it's true for everyone. I work for a guy named Marty Herney, was a longtime general manager of the Panthers, and it was with me. They got fired after 1 year and went to the Washington Commanders. And he said to me, "Hey Matt, just remember they're all 4th-round picks. Like when you bring players in with like sort of this expectation, they're all 4th-round picks and they need time. And it's some you look at some of the portal quarterbacks that are having a ton of success." Penix and Nix and all those guys, like they've been there for a while, right? They've had a couple of years to develop in that system, and so I think there's a lot of things to it. But I don't regret taking Jeff. I think Jeff's been an amazing teammate, and I've loved having him here. And I think he can do a lot of things to help a football team. I wish we would have done a better job by him, maybe in some ways, have helped him more. But I do think that we all have a tendency sometimes, and this is not about Jeff, just in general, to like forget that if some of the guys that we have went into the portal, people would be going nuts trying to get them. So like you just have to make sure that you value your own roster with as much respect as other people would if those guys went into the portal, if that makes sense. And so we're just trying to learn as we go about how to manage the portal plus high school recruiting.
So yeah, by the way, with Nix, Nix was like told to leave Auburn, right?
Turns himself into a Heisman candidate.
Right.
Shouldn't win it, but he should be on the stage.
No, and guy got hurt, got passed over, and had an opportunity, and man, he's been good.
Schmidt, you were there, though. Did Matt Rhule put a quarter in the swear jar for calling the Commanders the Redskins?
He did not, and that's okay. He was like, oh, whoops, wrong take there.
To be fair, Commanders, terrible mascot. They should have stuck with the Washington football team, honestly.
Right.
Washington football team I hated when it first came out, and then it like kind of grew on me, and they switched over to the Commanders, which is just awful. Awful, generic NFL name. I don't blame Matt Rhule there.
Let's go to the development phase here, and Mitch Sherman asked this question. Are you set on offense and the topic of reassignment? Do you have the people you want and need on the offensive staff right now?
I'm not ready to talk about that yet. I'm not there yet. When I hired Sat, the goal was to have a quarterback coach and have Sat coach the tight ends. It didn't work out. I think in the first year at a place like this, you get pulled in a lot of directions. And whereas some people think some of our coaches do a bad job, sometimes I think they did a great job. You're Terrence. I think Terrence is a great young coach, but like I can coach. Let me be the D-line coach, coach Nash and Ty and Jamari. Like those guys are grown. They played a lot of football, So I think a lot of our coaches did some of their best coaching jobs of the year, best coaching jobs. With that being said, the process that we talked about with Sam, like I'm going to go through that process, and every year I'll do that. And just figure out, especially now as the rules have changed a little bit, you can have analysts, and now we hope that the FOC will pass, that analysts can coach a position. I think it gives you some flexibility to bring in some experienced coaches to help, and maybe they can't help on game day, but they can help throughout the year. I don't even know why there's even a rule against it. Like, what's wrong with having people that want to help young people? There's a lot of things in flux. Obviously, you guys, Tony's name's been thrown around a bunch. There's a lot of things so instead of like, why rush? Just wait and see what's right, And part of that's having great conversations with the assistant coaches, which I did yesterday with some of them. Just, hey, what went right, what went wrong, and then just being really meticulous and making a really smart decision.
So, Rhule just was very transparent there. There's things to talk about. There's things to get better at. Is there a reality of having too much on one guy's plate? What they did do versus what they wanted to do? If things move forward. Here's an analyst / quarterback coach that you could bring in, and maybe that helps fix things. Let's talk about what you hit on, Elijah, and that was slotting and NIL spending. And this was a pretty big question, and this was the right answer. You want to take care of the folks that are trying to help you get better and help you win now versus spending on the unknown, because that would rub you wrong. That would absolutely rub you wrong if you're in that locker room.
I want to be careful how I say that, because I don't, again, because you're right. Like we can have no influence. We can't direct it. And one thing Bill Polian. I listened to Bill Polian talk when I was in the NFL, and he said, make sure that the highest paid guy on your team is not a free agent who comes in from the outside, unless it's the NFL. If you want to have a healthy locker room, let guys know that, hey, if you stay here, what you do will be rewarded. Name, image, and likeness is supposed to say that because of your name and what you do, People want to have you be associated with their business, their corporation, their charity, their foundation. So, I would always, I consider the guys on the team my guys. Right? I always want them to be taken care of. And then that being said, we have to procure talent. We have to get guys that come in to make them our guys. I just don't, I'm just anxious to see like the teams in the college football playoff, how many of them, have guys who are, the whole team, not one or two guys. I'm talking about the whole roster. Like, was it a massive overhaul, or was it kind of a lot of their own recruiting with some key additions? I think if you want to get to a certain spot, you should look at what those spots do. And my former coach of mine just got the Syracuse job and was at Georgia. And you look at Georgia, they're mainly high school recruiting, right? And keeping their guys, and so I think there's a lot to it. This is only my first. This is most guys only second or third year doing it. This will be my second year going through this process. But the guys we brought in the portal last year, I want to make this like they've been amazing parts of this team. I consider Ben Scott. I consider MJ Sherman. I consider them our guys. So I just want the guys on our team to know that if they stay here and they're loyal, good things will happen to them.
It's the right answer. Take care of the guys that are helping lay the bricks for you, but
the bricks.
Right. Sorry.
Also, I saw what you did.
Also, make sure that if you got to go get a difference maker, if he's like, I love what I'm hearing from Coach Matt Rhule, and I think they're going to be, I could help this offense, then go handle it. Go handle it. And you just don't have to be committed right now, but you got to be scanning all of it. You got to be wondering with that eye. A little bit more on the NIL and quarterback pricing. We'll get back to that. We'll get to more of your comments in the stream. Hail Varsity YouTube's where you can watch us. Give us a follow on Hail Varsity Radio at HVarsity Radio. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, the podcast, download it. And we'll have a Jock Doc, More Thoughts Nebraska, as Rhule reassesses year one as we roll forward.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, a Jock Doc with Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon, how we doing?
Hey, I'm doing great, buddy. You guys recover well after Thanksgiving?
Oh, we put on a few pounds, and now it's, we're harnessed to the treadmill, unfortunately. That's how we're doing.
Move right there.
It is, right? As long as it's not the old Huggy Bear punishment where it's level 11 and then incline 11. But that'll teach you not to be late to class. Anywho, just tremendous running back that's had a bit of drama this year with the Colts. Jonathan Taylor, the former Badger, and, of course, had the contract issue. Was dinged, and he's had some injury history, and now out for the season as he's got to have surgery on his thumb, and that's a big part of that, keeping the football secure so there's no fumbling.
Yeah, absolutely. Haven't been, obviously, like a lot of the injuries here, super forthcoming on kind of the whole details of everything with the thumb, but clearly, expensive enough. They're talking surgery for it. We've talked a few times about some thumb injuries here on the show. Kind of the two main things that we tend to see with some of our thumb injuries. The biggest one probably be more on the fracture side. So kind of at the base of the thumb, typically what happens is you lay that hand down on the turf to kind of brace yourself, where it gets hung up or caught up on somebody's jersey as they're tackling you, you're tackling them, and that thumb gets kind of bent back to the outside. One, you tend to have fracturing occurs at kind of the base of the thumb when that happens. There's a specific term for that called like a Bennett's fracture, which is at the base of the thumb, tends to split kind of into we call the interarticular portion or joint-based portion. If it doesn't involve fracture, then it tends to move a little further up the thumb to an area where there's a ligamentous structure on that inside part of the thumb that stretches, and you essentially kind of lose the ability to bring your thumb over to your index finger. So if you think about kind of pinching a paper between those two fingers, that would be where that injury occurs. You kind of lose the ability to do that, which obviously carrying a football would be impacted.
Dr. Brandon, and you kind of painted a good picture of just putting your hand down or bracing yourself. Can this also occur if you're carrying the football in that hand where, your thumb's over presumably the laces, or you're gripping the outside of the tip. Can you take a helmet there and cause the same sort of injury, or is it all about how you're falling and putting your hands up?
Yeah, good question. Most of the time it's more kind of on the, kind of bracing yourself, kind of that, we call that hyperextension move. But yes, absolutely, you take a direct shot as you're carrying the football, when somebody hits you with a helmet there. Yeah, you can easily develop a crack kind of across that area.
Is this an area that is pretty easy to heal? We talk a lot about different extremities and blood flow. Let's go a little bit there from the surgery itself, then to just how invasive that part of the body, that part of the hand is.
Yeah, and so in that area, typically fracture healing-wise, usually heal really well, surgery versus non-surgery. The big issue always is, where this injury occurs and basically where the ligamentous/musculotendinous kind of attachments are. If you have those attachments near certain parts of the bone and you break kind of really close to those, then what happens is you start to develop a thing called a deforming force, and that starts to basically pull that small kind of bony piece away from where it's supposed to be. So if that's happening, like, for example, like down near the joint aspect, then you start to have a joint that's not congruent anymore, and that would be when you start talking about needing more like that surgical intervention piece. And that's essentially what this probably is the scoop on this one. Otherwise, if it's more kind of on the long bone part, like on the metacarpal part, those usually heal really well. Even without surgical intervention, you usually can kind of hold those in place, with whether it be a splint or a cast. But again, the ones that tend to occur more kind of in the joint area, those tend to displace more and tend to be difficult to hold, just like a cast or a mobilization.
It's Dr. Brandon Seifert with us here, a Jock Doc Wednesday on Hail Varsity Radio. And Dr. Brandon, the Colts obviously going to want to get to Jonathan Taylor back as quickly as possible. They currently hold that final wild card spot in the AFC, despite everything that's seemingly gone wrong for them. Gardner Minshew is their starting quarterback. Jonathan Taylor now on the shelf. The Broncos hot on their heels, if I do say so myself. And I want to get your thoughts. The Colts unwilling to put him on injured reserve just yet, so they think maybe he can be back before that 4-week mark. But they said they'll make their final decision by the end of the week. Do you have any feeling on the recovery time on this? Under 4 weeks, do you think that sounds possible?
Yeah, I sure do. That's a good question. We typically see pretty quick recoveries with any type of surgical intervention, especially if it's fracture. The big thing with those is, one, can you play with the cast? Sure, there's times we do that. In the scenario of needing surgery, though, what you have to watch out for, so yes, you do surgery, you stabilize it, you can cast above kind of where you did surgery to further protect it. But what you have to watch out for when you're starting to be, pretty aggressive about return to play, it's the infection issue. And so you really want to have those incisions or kind of any type of wound site well healed before you kind of go back and start playing and again sweating over that kind of incision site, getting the incision site wet. Then you worry about infection issue. The other thing you worry about too is if this is something that, as opposed to like putting plate and screws over the bone, closing the skin over the top, if you have to just put pins in, pins typically stick out to the skin. You'd want to have those pins taken out before you obviously play, just from an infection risk, even if it's covered with cast. Those are usually kind of the big limiting factors. The other thing that would limit this would be if they have to do more ligamentous work. If you have to do more ligamentous work, sometimes that recovery is longer. So even though you might be able to throw a cast on top of it, it's still at risk of having further damage even underneath the cast. And so sometimes if they do ligamentous work, it makes that recovery, return to play, a little bit longer.
Dr. Brandon, one of the options we haven't discussed here is to go Ronnie Lott, just chop the whole thumb off. Is that possible? How important is your thumb?
That thumb apposition, it's kind of a difficult thing to live without. Enough so that if somebody does, here's kind of an interesting thought on this. If somebody does, lose a thumb, typically that's the one finger you start thinking about doing transfers for to try to regain some of that kind of apposition because it's such an important joint in your body. So they'll do a thing where they basically will transfer the big toe to your thumb. Okay, so a large big toe to thumb transfer is called a pollicization. And so that actually is a very important, essentially, finger or digit to have.
You do that, no one will ever thumb wrestle you again.
Might change the game a little bit there, right?
What the hell happened to your thumb? Well, it's actually my big toe. Long story. I got hit in the third quarter and was never the same. $50? Huh? Want to wrestle? We're talking Jonathan Taylor, his thumb injury. The Colts trying to hang on and keep Elijah's Broncos out of the playoffs. A Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center, Dr. Brandon Seifert. And the one thing about Taylor, man, just a tough dude, just to wrap on this, he finished the game. He finished the game. And then after the fact, they're like, we got to shut you down. It'll be interesting to see if he can make it back in that 4-week window and where the Colts go. No quarterback, no Pro Bowl running back, and still at 6-5. Dr. Brandon, we'll get caught up again next week. Thanks so much for the info on Jonathan Taylor.
Hey, you bet, fellas. You guys take care.
Good stuff from Dr. Brandon. A Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Jonathan Taylor. And still could have beaten me in fantasy football had he been started by our illustrious commissioner. Final thoughts on the Rhule press conference today. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Well, I'm getting stared at by a linebacker here in studio. Tim Bob's popped in. Be sure to check out Real Red Reaction. They're all posted from the post games, and I'm not asking you to be a masochist and go back through.
If you're not depressed enough on a Wednesday afternoon, go back through.
Don't go back through the losses, but they're all posted for you, is what I'm saying. YouTube channel, Hail Varsity YouTube, and Spotify, iTunes, Google Play.
Do you want to go relive that loss to Colorado? Now's your chance.
I remember Melton in the courtyard. We had such a great time in Boulder, aside from the game, the second half. But it was, and trying to get in.
Oh, yeah, your computer overheated in that courtyard.
It started melting, and it's the station's computer. So we had to move inside because Daddy couldn't pack a tent on the plane, and I didn't make Pack Mule Elijah drive out with a tent.
But on the bright side, because we moved inside, we got to hang out with the Snitleys. We got to witness the Boulder Peace Treaty.
We got to witness the Boulder Treaty Treaty. I see the Snitleys when we're down at Rosie's on Monday night with bags. They're playing bags. So it's pretty good. Tim Bob's checking in. Reminder to buckle up this holiday season. Use your seatbelt. It saves lives. It prevents injuries. Only if properly worn. Make it click. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. And Tim Bob, you're not on camera here, but what an adventurous season this was.
Man, I'm telling you, it was a little bit of a masochist, but just same story, second verse, third verse, fourth verse, right?
And season upon season, different season, year one, but yeah, Nebraska fans are looking for a little bit different outcome next season.
Tim Bob, do you have $1.5 million you're willing to throw at Nebraska's next quarterback?
Easy money, man. Talk to
Tim Bob's like, yep, we'll just get the old offering plate passed around.
But there's some people who've taken care of that, right?
Yeah. Here's the deal: if you're going to spend it, make sure it runs.
Right.
Okay. That's just it. If you're going to spend it, make sure it runs.
Yeah, don't go buy you a Mazda when you think you bought you a Maserati.
Sure. Let's one more thought here from Matt Rhule. Can we squeeze in Cut 5, NIL, and quarterback prices? One more thought. One more thought.
Every time I think you're done talking.
No, I'm sorry. That was pretty funny, though. Coach, go ahead.
It is what it is. No. I would not let people be able to buy people off another roster. It's so simple. Like, you think about, you recruit somebody and you develop them for 2 years, and then someone comes in and takes them, and then that coach gets fired. It's like, well, he actually did a pretty good job. So, I just, that part of it. But I think young people getting, I think the players getting a piece of, their name, image, and likeness that makes sense to me. 100% makes sense to me. There's not one part of me that's ever had a problem with it. I was in the NFL, and I was an assistant coach. Every player made more than me. As a head coach, most of the players made more than me, or a lot of the players made more than me. Like, they're the ones out there doing the work. I have no problem with that part of it. I just the hey, let me come in and take you from the roster. That part is unique, but it is what it is.
That would absolutely infuriate me. Protect against it. Montana Husker checks in to send us off to the evening. I think Rhule had a good point that the offense needs to get better overall to take some pressure off the quarterback. Yes, ding, ding, ding. And you has to put too much pressure on the QBs the last 10 years.
Starts with guys like Brix, Gatula, Pyle.
Hey, Adrian, go win it.
If I was going to spend money, I'd spend it on an offensive line.
Yeah, that's the way to go. Back tomorrow at 4 with Hail Varsity. Thanks for tuning in.